Hello, this is Group 6, and we did our presentation on Delta Airlines. I think everybody knows what company Delta is because Salt Lake City Airport has a hub for Delta. It's actually one of the biggest airlines that flies in and out of Salt Lake City Airport, so I think everybody is familiar with it. Our group has 3 people. Our names are Derek, Bhuvana, and Aaron. I'm from Utah, Bhuvana is from India, and Aaron's from Washington. So I think at some point the 3 of us have obviously flown between different states and countries. Right now I'm living in Japan, as you can see, and so I myself have flown between the Pacific over 18 times. I've been back and forth. My first time on a plane was actually when I was 18. But because of that, we're an international group, and so we thought it would be interesting to do our research on Delta Airlines. So Delta, actually, it started about 100 years ago, a little less than 100 years ago, as a small aerial crop dusting operation. It was called Huff Dalen Dusters. And since then, they've grown exponentially. They've got over 180 million travelers throughout the world each year. They're one of the world's largest global airlines. They operate between 52 countries and have 204 destinations. That number, 15,000 daily flights, is actually not just Delta planes, but it's also combining the partner airlines that they work with. But still, over 15,000 daily flights, and that's a lot of people. They bring a lot of people throughout the world, and so they have a lot of influence for globalization and creating a world where we can all be a part of a global community. And so because of that, their mission statement is right here. It says that we, Delta's employees, customers, and community partners, together form a force for positive local and global change, dedicated to bettering standards of living in the environment where we and our customers live and work. They've got a great company to work for. They connect the world. They're trying to have a positive change because they recognize that with the services that they offer, flights, they are making the world a much smaller place and connecting everybody. And so their vision statement is to be the world's most trusted airline. With the values that are listed. They have honesty, integrity, respect, perseverance, and servant leadership as their most top values. To always be truthful and keep your deals and to not hurt anyone, etc. And so because of this, with their vision and their the things that they work really hard for, they have one of the most awarded airlines. In only 2018, so just last year, Delta received over 30 awards from various news outlets, and governments even, and ranking sites. And so just 4 of the awards that they had I listed here. It says one of them is Best to Work For. The next is the #1 airline in North America by Business Traveler Awards. They hit a record 251 days without a mainline cancellation. That's the most days without a mainline cancellation in their airlines, or like in any airlines throughout the world and the United States. And they're one of the most admired companies of the year, in 2018 at least. They're an airline of firsts, so they're always, trying to be innovative and do new things, and that's why they're one of the most admired companies and one of the best places or best airlines in the world. So they were the first airline company to have in-flight Wi-Fi. That started in 2008. That was domestic, but now they have international Wi-Fi. They were the first to have full flatbed seats, to have an onboard recycling program, to have more than 100 million passengers a year. That was in 1997. And also the first company to have web-based access to real-time flight info. So that's a really, really smart use of their database and all of the information that they have going throughout their company. And so we thought it would be interesting to study that in their database. So their products and services, it's pretty simple and obvious. Obviously, they have flights for customers. They fly people throughout the world. With their flights, they also offer, luggage. They take luggage when you purchase a ticket. They take your bags. On the plane, they have food and drink. You can purchase meals. You can have drinks. They, are always combining. They're always working with other companies like Starbucks, etc. They have sky lounges in airports that you can have special access to as a member of Delta. Other various forms of entertainment on board with movies, etc. And then they have websites and apps. So they have a lot of products and services, points and reward systems that you can take advantage of, but it's all based on their main product and service, which is flights. And so for this slide, we will go ahead and pass it off to Aaron.
I'm Aaron, and I will take you through the next part of this presentation. The technical requirements and overview for Delta's database system is that it's going to be used by a website that's going to be accessible on all major operating systems, and it'll be used inside of the Delta app for all major mobile operating systems. This means that the database needs to be general enough that it doesn't matter what platform that the users will be viewing the information from, but it can be used on any platform. The requirements in order to go live for this database would be first the customer's ability to search and book flights. If they can't do this very basic thing, then that's going to make it very difficult for any of the rest of the Delta's process to go through. The customer should also be able to view their booked flights, be able to check in online, and to be able to cancel their existing reservations. On the company's side, they would like to be able to see how full each flight is and assign aircrafts to specific flights. This would allow them to see how well utilized their flights and their flight schedules are. So that, for example, if one flight has been consistently booked out, they can maybe move to a bigger airplane. They can accommodate more customers. And on the opposite side, if there's a flight that's consistently underbooked, they can go to a smaller airplane. They can conserve costs while still bringing in the same amount of revenue. Here is the ER diagram, which represents the conceptual model for our database. And I'll go through and talk about the entities that can stand by themselves first. So here in the bottom left corner, we have the passenger entity, which will represent any person who will be inside of the airplane during a flight. And so we'll keep track of basic information about each of the passengers, such as their name, where they live, their email, their phone number. Now, these passengers can take two different forms. Some of them will be crew members, and some of them will be customers. So we can see that we split this passenger up into two different types, the crew passenger and the customer passenger. Crew members will need to know their employee ID and their role, such as a pilot or a flight attendant. And the customers, we would like to know information such as the number of flights they've taken and their frequent flyer number or identification. From there, we will move over here to the aircraft entity type. This represents a physical airplane. And so they are identified by their aircraft number, or the number on each of the airplane's tail, which is unique to each individual airplane. We'll also keep track of the type of airplane it is and their capacity to hold customers and crew members. Right below the aircraft, we have the flight schedule entity type. And this represents a flight number and the information associated with that. For example, a lot of airlines will reuse the same flight number for a similar schedule. For example, Delta may have a flight from Salt Lake City to JFK at 9 a.m. every day. That might be flight number 100. And so every day there is a flight 100 from Salt Lake to JFK at 9 a.m. And that's what this flight schedule entity type represents. Going up from the flight schedule, we have the flight entity type, which represents a specific flight taken at a specific day. And so to identify the flight, we use the primary key from the flight schedule, which is the flight number, and add to it a departure date. And so for that same Flight 100 from Salt Lake to JFK at 9 a.m., an entry in the flight table may be that flight number on today, March 17th. So there may be, in the flight table, there may be 365 entries for the same flight number, each with a different day, one per day for the next year, for example. We also like to keep track of the current price for that specific flight on that specific day. For this middle section, uh, it is a ternary relationship, and I've zoomed in on it a little bit because it's going to take a little more um, analyzing. It links the customer passenger who is going to be purchasing a ticket with the flight that they are wanting to purchase and the payment associated with that reservation. So it is a ternary relationship that links all three of those: the customer, the flight, and the payment. That relationship can't exist without all three of those. If there is no payment, the passenger would be getting the flight for free. If there is no flight, we wouldn't know where the customer was wanting to fly to. And if there is no customer, we don't know who to collect the payment from, and we don't know the name or anything who we need to be looking for when the day of that flight comes. Another interesting thing is that the customer and the flights can both exist without being linked to a reservation, but the payment can only exist if it is associated with a reservation. Here is the logical model that we will be using for our database system. Um, Starting up at the top, we have the passenger table, which again keeps all of the contact information for the passenger who will be riding in the airplane. The next two are the customer passenger and the crew passenger, which again will be keeping information that is specific to each of those individual types of people, types of passengers. And we know what type of passenger each entry in the passenger table is based on which other table they are also included in. Next, we have the flight schedule table, which again is has a primary key of the flight number and its arrival time and location and departure time and location, but is completely agnostic to the specific day that that flight leaves from. The specific day, as you can see from the bottom entry in this chart, will be associated with the flight table. So it has the primary key of the flight schedule, which is the flight number, and it also includes the departure date, um, which creates the combined primary key for the flight table. We also, with this flight table, have which aircraft will be flying it and the current price if a customer was to purchase it today. The aircraft, as you can see from the table right above flight, is uniquely identified by the aircraft number and other information associated with that specific airplane, such as the type of airplane it is, like a Boeing 737 or an Airbus 320, A320, and the customer and crew capacity. Including these two capacity numbers allows us to see how well utilized each one of these flights is. If the number of reservations is approaching the customer capacity, we know that we may want to change the airplane that is used for that flight in order to accommodate more customers. One up from the aircraft table, we have the flight reservation table, which is uniquely identified by the reservation number, which will be given to the passenger at the time of booking so that they will know, they'll be able to reference that number if they need to change or cancel their reservation or when they are checking in. With that same table, the flight reservation table, we also include the passenger ID, so we know which passenger is booking it, the and the flight number and departure date, which is the primary key for the flight table. So we know the specific flight at the specific day that they are wanting to book. Included with that flight reservation table, we have the reservation status, which would be could be confirmed, it could be checked in, it could be canceled, so that we know if what the status is for that reservation. One up from the flight reservation table, we have the payment table, which, as you can see, has to have a reservation ID associated with it. Um, it also has the payment method and the payment status. So we know if they're using a Visa or cash, and we know if that payment has officially gone through and we've collected the money, or if we are still waiting for the bank to process that payment. And as you can see, the payment, the reservation ID cannot be null with the payment on the payment table. So we know that every payment will be associated with a reservation. And for the next section of the presentation, I will pass it off to Bhuvana.
Now, coming on to the tables that we used in this project, we used 8 different tables here, which include passenger, payment, customer, crew, aircraft, flight, flight schedule, flight reservation. Now, let's look at them individually. Here's the passenger table. This table includes the information of everybody, which includes the customers and the crew members that are traveling in that flight for that particular day. It stores the information such as name, email address, and phone number of everyone that's traveling in here. Now let's look at some of the sample data that we inserted in the table. Here's the sample data, which has passenger ID, first name, middle name, last name, email address, phone number, gender, and all other specific informations regarding to that particular customer passenger. Now moving on to the payment table. This table is very crucial for this entire module to work. The completion of the payment reserves the seat for that particular customer. The failure of doing so would not give them that particular seat or their particular reservation. So this actually is a very crucial, vital point table for the entire module. So this table basically stores the payment method and the status for each and every payment. And let's look at the sample data. Here's the payment ID, payment method, payment status, and reservation. We can see that the kind of cards that are used for making the payment are seen here, and the status, such as completed, pending, is seen here. Now, moving on to the customer table. The customer is basically the passenger that frequently flies in Delta. They will definitely have special privileges. Delta also provides this feature such as Sky Miles, which helps record who has traveled the most among all their passengers and so all the passengers who are frequent flyers in Delta appear in this table. And now let's look at the sample data that we inserted into this table. We can see the passenger ID and the number of flights taken by them and their frequent flyer ID. Delta obviously provides special privileges and discounts for them. They have better offers compared to other passengers. Now let's move to the crew table. Crew table stores information about the employees that travel in that particular flight for that day, and this is basically like the attendants and the pilots that are in that flight for that day. So these in this table we have passenger ID, employee ID, and the employee role. Now moving on to the aircraft table. This aircraft table stores information about aircrafts that are used, such as capacity of customer, crew, and we also have the type of uh, the type of aircraft, which is its name and the unique ID for that aircraft we have in this table. So let's look at the sample data. See, we can like see the aircraft number, aircraft type, and the customer capacity and the crew capacity for that particular aircraft. Now, moving on to the flight table. So each flight is a specific instance of a flight schedule on a specific day. The primary key is the flight number and a day. Specific aircraft that will be used for this flight is also provided. Well, the flight table is all about which aircraft is being used on what day. So not every aircraft usually runs in the same days for the same travel, like from the initial point to the destination point. So it records the the aircraft number that's being scheduled for that particular time and day. Now let's look at the sample data. Well, this table has flight number, departure day, aircraft number, and the price of that particular aircraft, particular reservation. Now, moving on to the flight schedule table. Each row is the information unique to an individual flight number. Required information includes departure time, location, and arrival time and location. Airlines usually have one of these flights every day, most of the times. Now, let's look at the sample data. The table includes flight number, arrival location, arrival time, departure location, and departure time. So this is basically all about it. And next, moving on to the flight reservation table, it links a customer to the flight that they have reserved. So passenger ID and the flight table's primary key are required. Reservation status is also provided in this table, such as reserved, checked in, complete, etc. Now, let's look at the sample data. Well, the sample data includes reservation number, passenger ID, flight number, flight departure date, reservation status. So that's all. I hope we have provided good technical insights about Delta Airlines through our project, and we also hope you liked it. Thank you so much.